Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
What a treat we have today. We must learn from history, and in this country, we have a lot to learn from our history, especially when we consider what's taking place right now with Islamic terrorism around the world. This is not a new phenomenon, and my guest is going to help us understand that in a very interesting way. Many of you are familiar with him. His name is Brian Kilmeade. He is co-host of Fox and Friends, and also a radio show, Kilmeade and Friends, and has been doing these programs for a very long time. He understands current events, and he also loves history, and he's written a history book. I think you might be very interested in reading it yourselves. I have read almost all of it. It's called Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates. And it's really a war that we don't know much about as Americans. I don't remember learning much about it in school, but we're going to learn about it today with our guest. He's in studio with me. His name is Brian Kilmeade. And Brian, thank you for being with me.
Penna, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, it's good to have you. I did hear you speak about this book at a conference a few weeks ago, and thought that, wow, this is so timely because we're fighting this war on terror. And then lo and behold, we had the horrible massacres in Paris, and now today recently in Mali. And so we must study history to understand how we need to react to these things, correct?
I think it's so funny almost that people say, well, if George Bush didn't go into Iraq, we wouldn't have these problems. If we didn't ignore that memo in August, we wouldn't have had the bin Laden attacks. Well, if Bill Clinton staged a real attack against bin Laden and didn't have a situation where he was trying to blunt the controversy with Monica Lewinsky, we wouldn't even have a war on terror, and it's just not true. I mean, you might want to blame this person or blame that person or this leader or this policy. If we weren't in Saudi Arabia, that wouldn't have the issue. Really, we're not in Saudi Arabia. If we weren't allies with Israel, really, Israel is not even coming up now, except for they're the only nation we could really count on in the region. What I found out in researching Thomas Jefferson is that even though he was not known as the wartime leader, the guy that would not convene a militia to take on the British, he was a founding father that not only co-wrote the Declaration of Independence, he was the one who realized early on that Islamic extremism needs to be confronted. You cannot pay your way out of this. And that's what we attempted to do. A lot of it was practical. We had no real navy after the Revolutionary War. We had no president. We had no constitution. Who's going to write these checks? We're buried in debt. And all we're asking for is passage through Northern Africa into Europe to sell our stuff. We wanted to get our economy on its feet. And instead, we were targeted by Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Tripoli, we now know as Libya.
Those are the Barbary states, and these were pirates. And I think the key point that needs to be made about it, Brian, is that they were Islamic, and we face an Islamic enemy now.
Yep.
And so these people were, in a sense, fearless. They had a lot to gain. They also had a religious reason not to be afraid of being killed. So there are many similarities.
To go to paradise.
Right.
Yeah, and what I did is, I hope you don't mind, that's your book that we sent you. But I outlined page 14 on that book, if you want to flip it open.
Sure.
And when we were confronted, right there where your little page marker is, when Adams and Jefferson went over and confronted the ambassador to Tripoli and say, hey, let's work our way out of this. I'm sorry about the misunderstanding. We need our guys back, and we need you to stop taking our stuff. What essentially did he say?
Well, here's the quote. All nations which did not acknowledge the prophet were sinners, whom it was the right and duty of the faithful to plunder and enslave. This sounds so familiar.
Does that sound exactly like what we're dealing with right now? Mm-hmm. It's exactly the same mindset. Now, Jefferson was one of the few people on the planet back then who read the Quran. He read everything, and he wanted to find out about religion. Never stopped inquiring about religion, the practicality of it, what he thought was myth, what wasn't, and what religions were out there, especially because he was forming a country that wanted to give you a freedom of religion. So in that, he tried to explain to him, listen, yeah, we're mostly Christian, but we're a country that welcomes everybody. You might have a problem with England, France. You don't have a problem with us. We're brand new. In fact, we have a problem with them. We're not even keeping a Navy. Leave us alone. And that was the comment. Now, when they come out of this meeting, Adams and Jefferson, because they wrote letters to each other afterwards, that was Adams's beat, London. Jefferson was in France. And we still don't have a president. We still don't know a way forward. We're making sure these states stay together and we stay a country. And they said, what's your recommendation? Adams says, well, you saw the craziness in their eyes. We got to write them checks. They need some money. Even if we have to take out loan from Amsterdam, we have to write them checks. And Jefferson said, I say we fight them. What do we stand for? What message are we sending the rest of the world? And Adams wins this debate. And then when Washington becomes president, he asked Jefferson, his Secretary of State, to write up a report, and he writes up 2. And in those reports, he doesn't tell Washington what to think, but anyone who reads them concludes, you really got no option. 20% of our entire economy is going to paying these people off, let alone the ratcheted up insurance, because even back then, insurance matters. And who's going to insure cargo that could be taken because there is absolutely no protection? So with 20% going, still Washington says, I'm going to split the baby. I am going to commission a Navy. I'm going to look to talk to them to work out a better deal for us. So we're going to spread out those contacts throughout the 13 states. We're going to build a Navy. We're going to go to school on what the British built, what the French built, and what these corsairs have, these pirate corsairs. And they go ahead and do it. And all of a sudden they cut a deal. And it's a deal that everybody knows is not worth the paper it's printed on, but they continue, Washington insists, continue making the ships. When Adams takes over, he's got himself a Navy. But Adams says, my main problem's with France. So he has this quasi-war. I'm going to keep writing the checks. After 4 years, in a bitter breakup, Jefferson and Adams are done. They never bring up the Barbary Wars.
Brian, writing the checks to me correlates with the policy of appeasement, in a sense.
It's extortion. It's like the mob telling you want to have that fish market in my area, you'll pay me for protection.
It doesn't work, and I think we're reaping the consequences of that in modern times today. Appeasement doesn't work, but a show of force, a show of strength, which is something Thomas Jefferson thought would be good and ended up actually proving was a good idea. But it took years, didn't it? It
took years. And just like World War I and World War II, in the beginning we're not ready for war, and then we ratchet up into war, and our tactics aren't great, our leaders aren't right, and we keep rotating them through, just like the Civil War. How many times did Lincoln rotate out his generals? How many times did we see FDR rotate out his generals until we got a supreme commander that everybody agreed on, which was Dwight Eisenhower? And he had problems with a lot of them. But you don't give up. You put up with problems at home and all of the pushback that you inevitably get. It's amazing to see, and can I say heartening, to see the turbulence that Jefferson had at home with Congress and how bitter and personal it got against him, pushing him to take the ships back, saying you can't win a war like that, saying you're wasting your time and wasting your money. But the problem early on was Jefferson, who approved of the Constitution, wasn't in the country when they wrote it, said, I need congressional approval to fight this war, but I'm sending my ships anyway. So he again said, I'm going to send my ships, but they're only allowed certain rules of engagement. They got to be shot at. They got to be challenged. And unless they're shot at, we could not go into these ships. Finally, we get congressional approval, and we get rid of those bad rules of engagement, and we ultimately get it right. And the guy that comes up over and over again is Edward Preble. His leadership allows us to really start taking the fight to them and gets their respect.
Ladies and gentlemen, there are so many parallels to what's going on today. Think rules of engagement and think how difficult sometimes that makes life for our military. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask Brian Kilmeade after the break, what would Thomas Jefferson do today in the face of Islamic terrorism? Just from his study and his writing of this great book, Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates. You can go to pointofview.net and see more about it. And I recommend you read it. I have, and I'm happy I did. We'll continue our discussion with Brian Kilmeade right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
No doubt you've heard the phrase, the barbarians are at the gate. It described what happened when the barbarian hordes descended on Rome. Mark Stein employs a powerful turn of phrase with the title of his recent column, The Barbarians Are Inside and There Are No Gates. He was writing about the jihadist attack on Paris, but he could just as easily have been writing about any country in Europe or even in North America. It is easy to see that refugees are flooding into Europe from Syria and other parts of the Middle East. We also know that ISIS operatives have used this mass migration to infiltrate into these countries. At least one of the jihadists who attacked innocent citizens in Paris came into the country this way. The barbarians are in the country precisely because there is no gate. The open borders in the European Union have allowed them to move freely and attack at will. The ironies surrounding this terrorist action are many. The president stated in one interview on Good Morning America that ISIS has been contained and is not gaining strength. His administration also announced that the U.S. State Department is planning to open a processing center for Syrian refugees in Erbil, Iraq. After all, we need to be able to process the 10,000 refugees America has decided it will take. In light of these recent attacks on places like Beirut and Paris, shouldn't the world leaders get together to plan appropriate measures and strategies? Well, sleep well, America. Many of these leaders are coming together this month in Paris, but they aren't gathering to discuss Muslim terrorism. They're meeting to talk about climate change. You have to wonder how serious all this talk about fighting terrorism really is. We need more than just mere promises and candlelight vigils. We need world leaders to be as serious about fighting jihadist and Muslim terrorism as many of them seem to be about fighting supposed global warming. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
My guest is Brian Kilmeade, and he is co-host of Fox and Friends and also his radio show, Kilmeade and Friends. He's an author, and we are discussing his book and sort of also how it relates to current events. And folks, not many broadcasters can say that they're on the air for 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, but Brian is, because of Fox and Friends. You may have seen him there, and he also has a radio program. And yet, I think he had enough energy to write this book, and I'm so glad that he did. Brian, I think your books probably do well because they're history, and Fox viewers like history. And I know that Point of View listeners like history, too, because you're teaching us something, first of all, about the players back then. And we know that George Washington, our first president, he wanted this country to remain neutral when it came to foreign policy. That's just not a realistic stance for a great power. Thomas Jefferson could see that early on, and he was proved to be right. But the question I want to ask you is, considering what has happened right now, the nation is really focused right now on terrorism worldwide, and the U.S. should be a leader in this, in fighting it. What kind of a leader would Thomas Jefferson have been? Would he have been a Barack Obama? In taking the positions he's taking now, or somebody else?
Nobody wants war, and when George Washington tries to avoid war, our number one war fighter of all time, the one who took on the British, slayed the superpower, kept our army together, and he said, "Listen, let's stay out of this. Let's let France and England and Spain, let's them wrestle over it. We got to do it slowly but surely. Take this whole North America. I mean, we want to get the Spanish out of Florida. We want to get the French out of Louisiana, and let's get England out of Canada." That's what they hoped for because they were still rattling our cages. Nobody wants war. Having said that, Jefferson's first move before we had a full-fledged Navy was, let's get a coalition together. Let's get all these nations that are being offended paying this money. But he couldn't get them together. There was no commitment from Sweden. England didn't want to hear from us. French didn't want to hear from us. When they did, it was just a half-hearted sense because they could write a check out of their treasury. They didn't really want to. They didn't want to follow our path and do what we say. We didn't have the respect. Now, we should have the respect of the world, but we put together a coalition which was not worth the paper it was written on. I mean, when's the last time United Arab Emirates did anything against ISIS? Jordan had a good 3 weeks. We don't hear anything. Now, I believe that's a lot to do with Barack Obama. I have a lot to do with the fact he didn't take a David Petraeus and say, you're in charge of this coalition. He would have worked those avenues, made sure they'd stay involved. Regardless, they're not as committed to a fight because we do this thing where we try to do things the right way. We see terrorists taking advantage of their own people, their own Arabs, their own Muslims, and we think that's wrong, especially when they point their fingers and their daggers at us. Jefferson tried to do a coalition. When it didn't work, he took it on himself. When the rules of engagement were ineffective, he changed. When he didn't have the right leaders there, like he had Captain Morris, this guy decides he's in charge of the coalition. He goes with his family. He's got his kids on board. He's got his wife there. And when he's traveling around, he's visiting capitals and going to tea parties. Meanwhile, our guys are freezing to death in the Tripoli basin trying to slow down these pirates looking for some leadership. Get out of there. Throws Morris out. In comes the right guy, and it's Edward Preble. Preble gets over there with Stephen Decatur on his side, and they start taking the fight to him, and man, they start making a difference. So to me, Jefferson has showed that he's going to use what he thinks is going to work, be an internationalist. When that doesn't work, he's going to take it upon himself. When our tactics aren't effective, he is going to change tactics. And in the end, he's going to give the military the ability to win a war. Now, would he have loved to have been hands-on? But there was no satellite television. There was no Twitter to keep in touch. We didn't have cameras everywhere. So you'd write letters, and essentially it was, Admiral, win the war. Because I'm not going to tell you how to fight a naval war. This guy spent his life on land reading books. So that was the freeing thing. If you're in the military, you get to go out and fight. These guys don't know how to fight. My long answer to your question is Jefferson would have adjusted till he got total victory. He did pull up before he got total victory, but he was not involved in the final negotiation. He empowered somebody who was the wrong guy to buy a Sleer to cut the best deal possible.
All right,
and that
we're
was
giving
not the
away
best
the
deal
end.
possible.
Spoiler alert, but this is history. So if you know history, you already know how this ends. Brian, that was one thing I noticed was that things took so long because they didn't have the technology that we have today. So if you sent someone out as a captain of a ship, or you sent a flotilla out under a leader, that person had a lot more autonomy, it seems, than a lot of our military leaders have today. Many of our wars are actually run by the administration. But it was a little different then, wasn't it? Absolutely.
But, I mean, I listened to Jeb Bush today, this week, talk, and he said something that was so insightful. Everyone's talking about, well, I would be tough against ISIS. I'd go crush Al-Qaeda. Jeb Bush said, I would go up to my military leaders and I would say, my objective is I need you to win the war and I need you to crush them. And then my question would be, how do you plan on doing that? I would ask for plans. I'd pick the plan that I felt most comfortable with, and then we'd go do it. That's where it should start. I don't tell, as much as I'm a New York Giant fan, I know I shouldn't be calling the plays on the sideline. Yeah, I've watched hundreds and thousands of games, and I was there before this coach was there and after, but I'm not the expert. We do not empower our military under this administration. They are not given the freedom to act the way they want. And when the president gets up and says, I don't have a plan, and you have retired generals saying, that is not the truth, I gave him plans, and he basically told me to hit the road. I mean, I'm talking about today, as it relates to yesterday and yesteryear in America from 1785 really to 1815, you have a president who says, don't just pop off, tell me how. Okay, fine. Evidently, generals go in there, and they tell them, and they have to have so-called thick skin because the president goes aggressively back them, just ridicules what they want to do and the objectives they want to take. And they have to ask themselves, do they want to throw their stars on the table and say, I quit, or do they want to wait this guy out? That's how bad it's gotten between the Pentagon and the White House. For me, if I'm in there 50 years and I have a pension coming my way, I wait him out because hopefully America will sober up and get a leader, Democrat or Republican, that understands the threat.
You know, it seems to me there were so many parallels that I saw as I read your book, Brian. And ladies and gentlemen, I just want to give you the title again and really recommend it. It's called Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates. And this was our first conflict. Our first international conflict as a nation. It solidified, in a sense, our position as a military power. We built a Navy. The Marines came out of this, and we gained some respect, but it took a while. But these pirates that were boarding our ships, that were taking our people prisoners, they were, in a sense, Brian, and correct me if I'm wrong, they were sort of like the proxy fighters of today.
Yeah.
The pirates, because the nations, there were 4 Barbary nations: Tripoli,
Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria.
yeah, right. Okay. And these nations, I mean, they weren't trying to pull these pirates back, were they?
They were privateers, so essentially say, "Hey, this is my objective. Hey guys, you have no values or ethics or inner voice. Go out and take these guys hostage. Chop off their heads if you have to. Come with swords." We would shoot people with cannons, and we had a way to approach it. We did it in a military way. They would look to sneak up on you and board the ships and go to hand-to-hand combat. We ended up being great at both. But first off, when we started taking the fight to them, we were literally blowing them out of the water, chopping off their masts, and sending them out to sea. So they knew also that if they were captured, their life was not only going to be one of imprisonment, they were going to be enslaved. So we were going to fight Americans. We're going to fight to the death too. Number 2 is we also knew there was their advantage if they boarded us. So we had to learn to fight, be armed, and we also knew how to take them out before they got close. And that's pretty much how we built the ships. What I thought was interesting about Jefferson is that this is how resourceful he was. He suggested for a while capturing Turkish ships, holding them hostage, and exchanging them for the Americans. Why? Because Turkey was pretty much in control of the Ottoman Empire and kind of let these Barbary coastal nations do their own thing. So he said, why don't we go grab some of their guys? I mean, remember for a while we thought, let's go do this enhanced interrogation thing when it came to against Al-Qaeda, and let's find out what they know, and let's see if we'll get their attention. Now, we didn't even want to enslave them and exchange them, but just goes to show you, our founding fathers, who should be lauded in every way, shape, or form, were doing this thing called going for victory, and they would be resourceful, and they wouldn't worry about the way it plays politically. For him to think about that. Jefferson told to Monroe this: I am of the opinion that John Paul Jones and a half dozen frigates, he was our legendary naval officer, would totally destroy their commerce by constantly cruising, means securing, and cutting them to shreds. So Jefferson was saying, we got to take on this fight. Look at ISIS. Look at Al-Qaeda. They hide in caves, they pick on the meek, and they look to blow you up when you're not looking, and they hope to get to paradise, which we all know is not going to happen. These are not big, strong guys that need to be feared. And if you talk to those who fight them, then and today, they're not 10 feet tall. We already took them out. Our Navy SEALs are dying to get back in there and show them what real courage is and what real war fighting's about.
My guest is Brian Kilmeade, and he, along with Don Yeager, is the author of Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates. This is the forgotten war that changed American history. We don't know a lot about it, but you can learn about it by getting the book. Go to pointofview.net to find out more about it, and we're going to continue our discussion. It's so interesting to look at the way the Islamic terrorists of that day, which was the Barbary Pirates, acted a lot like the terrorists now that threaten us, that we're trying to figure out how to deal with. We could learn from history. We'll try to do it some more right after this.
Point of View is committed to spreading the truth, oftentimes a truth that those in political power don't like getting heard. But the only way it can be heard is if our team stands strong together, if you do what you can to support the Point of View Truth Team. It's having an impact, as we heard recently from U.S. Representative Louis Gohmert.
Everywhere I go, I hear people that you have influenced, that Point of View has affected. You have made such a difference, and you rely on people to contribute, and if they don't contribute, then that truth does not get heard.
Help Point of View make a difference. Pray and consider what level is right for you. $30, $65, $100 a month, or even more. Please do what you can. 1-800-347-5151, or visit online, pointofview.net. Look near the top right for the link that says Become a Monthly Partner. Join the Truth Team. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
Welcome back to Point of View. My guest is Brian Kilmeade, and we're talking about his new book, which I know is going to be a great success, Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates. But I want to kind of pick his brain a little bit about the elections because, you know, as we've seen what happened in Paris and really how ISIS is such a threat in various places, it's kind of become real to us as an electorate here in the United States, Brian. And so, of course, we're looking at a campaign. We're looking at 2016 elections, and the GOP is looking at who to nominate. And so, you know, in that light, and especially given what you know about history, who do you think would be some of the folks who might be the strongest in this arena of foreign policy and keeping us safe?
Well, I mean, right away people say, well, what have you done? It's hard for a governor to say I have an international policy, so we have to go about what they say. I say that Jeb Bush made a lot of sense this week when he was on Fox News, on Fox and Friends, and he said, I would convene with my military leaders. I would tell them my objectives, and I would ask them to get back to me with how they were going to achieve those objectives. I'd pick the best plan, most workable as possible, and then we'd go. President Obama doesn't do that. Number two, Rand Paul kind of scares me a little bit. I give him so much credit for being true to his school, but he essentially says, seems to let the Arabs go fight it out. We'll provide any support we would. Well, how does that go? Half these nations, these Muslim nations, are in support. The other half are afraid. Then there's Shia that'll take on Sunnis regardless. They're the Hatfields and McCoys. They're going to fight regardless. If we have to achieve our own objectives, we have to go in there. When I look at Governor Christie, he seems to be being the most blunt, most tough. I think that he goes a long way. I think that he's been very direct in how we assess things. And I think what he's also shown, even though his ratings don't reflect it, much more coolness. That you don't see him losing his temper like he used to. Rick Santorum has always made me feel good with his foreign policy. He's not registering. The guy who's the most comprehensive and seems to understand it the best is not rating it all in any poll. And that is Lindsey Graham, who actually is in the National Guard, the South Carolina senator. He actually goes over there more than anybody else. He's been to Afghanistan 26 times. I think he's been to Iraq 100 times. He knows all the people, goes to the aircraft carriers. He decides to vacation with the troops. So, again, he's not polling well. I would feel very good if he was in some State Department. Ted Cruz is someone who at first seemed to be laid back, more Rand Paulish. Now he seems to be pushing a little bit more aggressively. So I think that's gone a long way. Donald Trump, who said, let the Russians do it, scared me. I like his new philosophy, bombed the heck out of him. But no troops on the ground is not practical. So I can't go through him there. And as far as Ben Carson, the nicest, most talented, most intelligent guy out there, his own foreign policy handlers were in the New York Times quoted as saying, the doctor doesn't really get it. We try to tell him over and over again, but doesn't seem that interested in foreign policy. I'm saying to myself, that's from people on his team. Now, this is a brain surgeon. He could pick up foreign policy in his sleep. So for somebody in his own team to say that, and even when they walked it back, saying that, well, he's gotten older, sometimes he doesn't hold on to information,
Scary.
That's not going to help. That's not going to help at all. And in terms of the mainframe, Marco Rubio has spent a lot of his time. He's only 42 years old, but he's on foreign relations, and he uses a lot of that time. I have yet to see him stumble on foreign policy. And when Rand Paul challenged him on that debate and said, where are you going to get that $1 trillion to boost up your Defense Department? He said, listen, we'll have to get it because we have no country if we can't defend it. And see, when people look at, what's happening with Al-Qaeda and ISIS, they think that is offense. It is defense. We have to go on offense. Our best defense is offense. Blowing them away, stopping them from planning and plotting. That's the only way to defend. Because the FBI director has put his hands up and said, I cannot track everybody. These apps are encrypted. Our Silicon Valley is no longer cooperating with us. Thank you, Edward Snowden. And thank you, NSA, for possibly doing things that without telling them. Now it's hard for them to sell their products. So they think of America spying on them. Long story short, I think everyone's acted tough. Rand Paul has a little scare me. It seems like Donald Trump is making it up as he goes along at times. But it is noteworthy that since the Paris bombings, the one candidate that's improved the most is Donald Trump in polling. His numbers have grown. They like somebody that's sitting there, I'm in command, I'll take care of you. That's my humble opinion. Will they actually vote for him when they say, we should give a guy with no political experience a shot? I am not sure. But the polling is now over 40%, according to 2 polls, one of which was Reuters.
Brian, in your experience in looking at politics, you mentioned governors, and we've seen a few of the governors drop out. With early people that we thought might actually take hold, like Scott Walker, maybe even Rick Perry. So
now Bobby Jindal.
So it may not be a governor. And governors, I mean, they make sense because of executive experience, but we're seeing sort of the rise of the senator, the Rubios, the Cruzes. You mentioned
Barack Obama, Senator Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, and so what about senators in a world where we get to see the senators, since we have so much media that we can see how they are in opposition to the early days of our country where we only knew our governors. Do senators make sense sometimes?
Barack Obama, I really believe, has poisoned the well for a lot of them. A one-term senator. That might be, as they say, the Bush last name hurts Jeb the most. The one-term senator hurts Cruz and Rubio the most. And doesn't mean Cruz isn't, whip smart, understands what he's doing. Marco Rubio has got almost the complete package. His presentation, his confidence, his personability, the way he can go into a green room and make 3 people feel special and go into front of 30,000. But again, Barack Obama hurts that because we went through that. There was so many people who saw this 48-year-old freshman senator and thought he could be brand new. And believe it or not, he might not be dug in party politics, and he might actually bring Republicans and Democrats together. Man, was I wrong, as I was one of the people on the radio, on Kilmeade and Friends, who said that, and my callers never let me forget it. They said, remember, you were the one who gave him a chance. I go, I know. I gave him a chance. And he ends up being the most divisive president that I could possibly remember without any interest in talking to the other side.
All right. You mentioned land wars, and a lot of folks, a lot of experts have been looking at Syria and saying, we can bomb all we want. If there's not people, our military, going in there, we're not going to get Syria into the position where, for instance, some of these refugees could go back. You could have a healthy country again unless we do that. What's the importance of a land war and boots on the ground?
Well, I mean, historically in this war, as great as we were doing, pounding them from the shore, running down their ships and strangling their economy, we still couldn't get Tripoli to its knees. It was William Eaton, who had all this experience as a 15-year-old Revolutionary War fighter, and then they went back in as an officer after his career in Dartmouth, and then became an ambassador to Tunisia, kind of a tough Mike Ditka, George S. Patton type character with a tremendous intellect, who learned Indian dialects in early America and also learned to speak Arabic when he was over there serving in Tunisia. Just a brilliant, tough guy, they said, with a thick neck and premature graying hair and a cast iron chin. So he went up to President Jefferson and said, listen, it's James Cathcart's idea. He's ambassador to Algiers, but we could get the right ruler of Tripoli. We could put him in power. His brother is in control of Tripoli. He's Youssef Karmanali. His brother, Hamid, is the guy that should be there. He was tossed out, and he's sitting in Egypt. Because what if I get him from Egypt, and we lead a ground war right and take some major cities? Jefferson said, are you crazy? We're not going to do that. There's no way we're doing that. So 3 years of frustration, and Jefferson, feeling political heat at home, says, bring me William Eaton. They don't have any record of the meeting, but he did leave this. He did keep records that he had this meeting with Eaton on Eaton's dialogue in his book, which I read, which was written in 1813. Eaton said, I got 1,000 muskets and $20,000 and was dropped off in Egypt. So he went there, and the story to get to Hamid, who he didn't even know if would agree to this, he sees a guy with no leadership skills sitting with 5 Malamute guards who didn't even think he could ever see his family again. And they say, listen, you can do this. He has a handful of Marines with him, and they lead the ground war. When the word comes to this Youssef Karmanali, is a brutal leader, he gets scared. He can't believe it. Suddenly these Americans won't quit, and they are willing to sacrifice their own blood in order to do this. And we take Derna in 2.5 hours after a 500-mile march. And it wasn't until that land war, until he knew that we were coming to Tripoli, and by almost all accounts, we were about to take Tripoli entirely and bring them totally to its knees. And Jefferson, who put Tobias Lear in charge, prematurely cut a deal. We got our guys out, paid $60,000, and got a verbal, we won't attack you anymore. But it was the land war that brought him to the table. We kept sending, after we started pounding them, destroying their forts and killing their ships, we sent messages. You quit now? The message came back. Not a chance. Not going anywhere. but it was the land war. And I say to you, we don't need 50,000. We don't need 20,000. We need probably less than 10,000, mostly special operators, to go in there with the cooperation of other forces to take them down. Let Odierno, let Petraeus, let others go in there. Let's script it. We did it before. We could do it again. Doing it from the air is not going to do it. You know what else it's going to do? It's going to kill a lot of innocent people. Go in there, let them mark. Go in there, let them mark up the targets, and then hit them from the air with precision weapons.
You heard it right here from Brian Kilmeade from Fox and Friends. He's the author of Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates. Sometimes when you study history, it informs your ideas about what should be done in the present. Well, ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. We're going to spend another segment talking with Brian. And again, go to pointofview.net and check out the book.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Well, we're having too much fun here. Brian Kilmeade is my guest. Brian, one thing I liked about the book was you pick up these historical figures, captains of ships, and, a president, Thomas Jefferson, first a Secretary of State, and before that, one of our founders. And you develop their characters, and, we begin to understand, number one, it matters who a president sends to do a job. There was one that he sent, Morris, who didn't do the job and set us back for a couple of years, didn't he?
And it's unbelievable because we have this thing called the blockade. You just sit in the water and you escort our ships.
That's really all you have to do.
Yeah, you just sit in the water and then you wait to be attacked and you try to seal off all their commerce. And Morris didn't even show up for work. He lands at Gibraltar. He's having tea parties. He's bringing his wife aboard. And people describe that he's not even trying to lead the ship when he was on it. Then he gets off of it. He doesn't show up. By the time he shows up, he really only serves like a month before he gets called back. So he gets called back, sent there. It was an embarrassment. And basically, he was almost court-martialed and was exonerated at the last minute. But it forced him to keep going, peeling back for the right leader. And he found it in this guy, Edward Preble. And he comes over with Tobias Lear and Stephen Cathcart. And, man, this is a whole generation of warfighters that should go down in naval history. And if you go to Annapolis and if you talk to them and go to the Marine Museum, they know all about him. So if I could tell you about Stephen Decatur, Decatur, Georgia, everybody knows that, and it's the Decatur House in Washington. Stephen Decatur, by all accounts, was en route to being president. This guy was fearless. What he's best known as, and where it really broke out is, we had a captain named William Bainbridge. And William Bainbridge was a star-crossed guy, but he was at 15, at about 18, he distinguished himself, and he was one of the youngest captains we ever had. But he also lost our ship one time because he thought he misidentified a ship. Turns out we were bored and he had to give it up. So Bainbridge has got the USS Philadelphia, and he's in bay. He hits ground, and his ship is stuck. The Corsairs realize that. He throws everything overboard and is taken prisoner for 3.5 years. Well, the USS Philadelphia, not only are our guys gone, but the USS Philadelphia is our finest ship, and they have it. They're refitting it and going to use it against us. So Preble says, I need a unit, special operations unit. So he gets a couple of guys. He
didn't call it that.
Yeah. But what did he call it?
I don't know. It didn't call it a special operations unit.
No, we call it that.
Yeah.
So he goes, we need a unit. We need those willing to go in and follow Decatur. So they end up dressing like Arabs, like Muslims, boarding the ship in the dead of night, killing 23 of those sailors as they were retrofitting the ship, and then blowing it up. And so impressive was it that Lord Nelson, who was the premier admiral of his day in the British Navy, who were the superpower of their day, said that was the most daring exhibition of this generation. So Decatur did this over and over again. Decatur is also a guy who ran a mission and found out his brother was mortally wounded by one of these Malamute guards, one of these huge guys on another ship. He watches his brother struggle for his life. He gets a few guys together. He goes, we're going to go get revenge. This is what kind of leader he is. He jumps in and takes on this Arnold Schwarzenegger-like character, and he's about to take a sword into the head when one of his men, Tom Frazier, jumps in front of the sword and takes the blow himself because he thought Decatur was more valuable to his unit than he was. Now, Frazier ends up living. But what kind of leadership, and I have a depiction, a painting of that in the book, what kind of leader engenders that type of loyalty in the people that fight for him? When he's done, they say, this guy can do anything. He becomes the hero of the War of 1812. And in 1815, when it's timed again to go back to these Barbary powers and shut them down for good, it's Decatur that leads the charge. Not only does he get our guys back, but he makes them pay us for the inconvenience. So from Algeria to Tunisia to Morocco to Tripoli, he gets them all back. William Eaton was probably the most impressive guy. This is how he was observed. Eaton is firm in constitution, industrious, indefatigable, determined, and persevering. When in danger, he is in his element and never shows to so good advantage as when leading a charge. So that's how he was described by the people that fought with him then. He also urged us to take action in saying this: if the Congress does not consent that the government shall send a force into the Mediterranean to check the insolence in these scoundrels, I hope they will resolve at their next session to wrest the quiver and arrows from the left talon of the American eagle and substitute a fiddle or bow or a cigar in lieu. Essentially saying, man up. Come on, America. Take them on. Don't tell me you're scared. I know them. I've stared at them. Don't be scared. I'll lead you there. And when he got the opportunity, he did. These are great Americans who, when they died, people cared. He got 10,000 acres in Maine for his work. But when he came back and couldn't finish the job, he ended up drinking himself into the grave when he never got the fame and acclaim he needed. Preble, same thing. He's known in naval circles, but does anyone know Edward Preble? Stephen Decatur? Yes, some people, but not enough. My hope is, Penna, when you close that book, you open it for Jefferson, you close it thinking about Eaton, Decatur, and Preble.
Yeah, I got to know some personalities that I had never known about before, and it's inspiring. There is one other sort of parallel with one of the issues we face here in government, Brian, that I wanted to ask you about, and that is Jefferson wanted to get approval for the war that he was going to have and the battles that he was going to lead. And so he tried, and he got congressional approval, and he's just like today, he had to wait for the Senate
to come
years.
back.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess that's part
Because
of our
they had to
history,
literally
too.
send him. Yeah, they sent him there. Hey, where's Rhode Island? Is Rhode Island going to get here? Where's Connecticut? I asked for Connecticut to come down. Did anyone tell Connecticut? So that's the way it went. When he became president, he sent his ships over. He wasn't necessarily avoiding Congress. By the time they get back here, by the time they come in, by the time they vote, let's just send the Navy. And he sends the Navy while still guarding against the Constitution. What's interesting is that Jefferson...
And he helped write it.
Yes. And the thing is, especially the Declaration of Independence, but I thought it was amazing, too, that 50 years after the founding of our country, he was concerned. Why was he concerned? John Quincy Adams decided to use the federal government to make roads and bridges. And he said, you cannot do that. He goes, that's up to the states to make their own roads and bridges. The federal government can't be hiring people to make roads and bridges. So that was so interesting. He was 80 years old, 81 years old. He died at 83, I think. And he was worried that John Quincy Adams, who he knew quite well and mentored, was misinterpreting his Constitution that he wrote.
Wow.
He also, you know what platform he ran on? Reclaiming the spirit of 76. They were concerned in 1801 that we were losing the spirit of 76, which heartens me. Because we're always concerned about losing the spirit of America, and we seem to be always on watch still today about losing the spirit of America.
Yeah, Brian, that's encouraging to me because, sometimes we feel like the left is winning right now. And in a sense, they're doing a lot of damage. But this is still America, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. But by the way, you could say they're winning, but could you show me how? They've lost the House. They've lost the Senate. They've lost almost all the governorships. They're losing the state houses. They have 3 ridiculous candidates on the left, one with a great resume but no accomplishments, one who's a socialist and not even a Democrat, and the other one who is a failed mayor, a failed governor who looks scared to death on stage that makes absolutely no sense. So please, in the big picture, there's some issues where that are getting some traction. I'll grant you that. But can you please show me the leadership that they have? I see a bunch of 40-year-old governors with a lot of promise, even the ones that weren't successful in this run. I see 12 to 15 people on stage over the past 3 months that could be president, have legitimate cases that would be solid presidents. And America cares because 25 million people watch them, 8 million people watch Democrats. So for those who think the left is winning, those are the numbers.
Brian, thank you so much for not only what you do at Fox and on your radio show, but also for writing this book about history. I hope you continue to write these books.
If you'll continue to have me on.
I will. And I really want to say thank you for joining me today. And I hope and pray that you have a wonderful time going out and talking to people about this, because we've had a lot of fun doing this with you today.
Yeah, for more, BrianKilmeade.com. You can order a book, get it signed, or find out where I'll be.
Yeah, that's BrianKilmeade.com, or you can just click through from pointofview.net. We'll have that there if you're driving and didn't get to write it down. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being with us. This has been fun, and I recommend highly that you get the book. I'm going to finish the last 50 pages tonight.
You better.
In case you haven't noticed, this is not NPR. We believe in truth, that right and wrong are not just personal preferences, and we don't get corporate or taxpayer support. If you are a member of Truth Team 360, thank you. Thank you for stepping up and continuing to step up. And if you're not, please don't think someone else will step up. Today is the day for you to step up. We need you to be a part of Truth Team 360. Visit pointofview.net/team. Choose your level of support. Choose your Truth Team gift, a tote or sport bag, whichever fits your style. pointofview.net/team. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. pointofview.net/team. Again, today is your day to join the team. pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.